introduce our data quality studio for Business Central. And we want to be able to, of course, what you see here, stop the data at the source. In this meeting, you will see myself, Eric van Hofwegen. I've been in the community and dynamic space over almost 25 years at the moment, working at Staedean for more than 20 years, all about data migration, projects, data, etc. And that is me. And I'd like to talk to you about how to prevent bad data coming into Business Central. And together with me, I have Peter. Peter, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Eric.
Good to hear you.
So excited to be here. My background's a little bit longer in the industry than yours. I actually have an engineering degree. People confuse me with a salesperson because of my enthusiasm, but my degree's in industrial engineering, and those are the guys that do things faster and better. So it's very applicable to what we're doing here. And I literally started with manufacturing ERP. My first day was 7 days after I graduated from college. So I've literally been selling, implementing, and fixing enterprise ERP with a specialization towards manufacturing for over 30 years. And I have magnificent experience with your platform on the AX FSCM side. And now that whole technology, which is like 20 years of investment in clean data and dynamics, is coming to the BC channel. I'm super excited with that and glad that you asked me to join you today.
Today's agenda, what are we going to talk about? What we'd like to do is introduce you to the solution, also see the challenges that we have in the BC platform, of course. But then we take you through the product itself, what you can do, how it works. We'll take you through a short live demonstration about what will be the user experience there. And then, of course, we can also take a look at the future. What will bring the product in the future? And finally, maybe you also want to know, when is this product available and how can I get my hands on it? And that is something that you will get answered here as well. Feel free to ask questions throughout the session. If we can answer the question during the webinar, we will do it, and otherwise we will leave it at the end. But good meeting you all and good seeing you here. First of all, data patterns in everyday business, right? In everybody's life. What you will see there. Have you ever had the chance, and have you ever had it, that you got an email, and especially my name, I'm living in Tampa, Florida. And we have also somebody else on the call, Kati. We have kind of European names. And how many times I get an envelope with my name spelled wrong? And that's not great, of course, for you as a customer. You don't like it. And for me, I like it. If there's a customer getting information from you, they don't like it. So quality is, of course, of high importance. And you see that quality and that information also in BC. You can have, for example, duplicate records. The customer comes there 3-4 times. Quite easy. And how do you do reporting? You can have certain information not populated. In this case, like a payment term or payment method at vendors, contact information, bad email addresses, credit limits not populated correctly, maybe because of an incorrect currency. So different possibilities for getting data bad in the system are there. And people don't like it. Peter, you have experience with this as well, right?
Yeah, think about it. The obvious, sending any kind of correspondence to a company with their name misspelled or everything capitals or punctuation not right, just doesn't give a good professional feel to the folks you're working with. But think about having duplicate customers and doing some kind of reporting on who your best customers are or what kind of margins you're achieving with different products for different customers. Now, you probably recognize if your top 10 or 20 customers have duplicates, but it's those ones after that where if you have multiple customers and any type of reporting, that just starts creating that type of a nightmare. So those types of issues are subtle, but they're also extreme.
Now, and then if you look internally more, because manufacturers specifically, but also other companies, that the bad data also suddenly becomes an operational problem. And it really internally affect companies. For example, in planning, duplication, of course, will have unreliable demand planning. You get the demand planning in the wrong way. Purchasing, maybe the incorrect vendor or the incorrect vendor information, or you don't get paid at all. Those kind of things will you see in the system Production could be related to the production. There's a sales order, and if the information is not correct, what will happen to the commitment? The customer suddenly gets their goods 3 months late. That's something that you don't want. And of course, the reporting, you highlighted that already, Peter. Reporting from the system, if you have duplicate records or incorrect information, reporting, can be really bad. And nowadays, of course, also in the AI world, getting information from the system, this will, affect, that data will affect that as well. And this is one way, looking internally, but there's also other, problems that manufacturers face with bad data in the system, Peter.
What's interesting, bad data can have catastrophic results and it can have subtle bad results that you don't even notice. So from a catastrophic standpoint, I've been in on rescue projects where pricing or costs were migrated incorrectly. And what's interesting is that when, for example, bad pricing goes in the customer's favor, you tend not to see those errors for 6 months when you have a nightmare that you have to clean up. Whereas if that bad pricing goes against the customer, they'll alert you immediately. But then you have something subtle like that, the bad naming consistencies and things like that, that can slowly erode trust over time and just bleed customers where the result isn't immediate, but it's long-term, that reputational thing. So that bad data can be dramatic, or it can be bleed you over a long period of time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and then there are solutions, right? Because people think of, let's do a solution, let's do something about it, and then get the data back. And that is an endless life cycle, right? We will go and see, okay, there are problems. We can do hard-coded information, but bad data, it will be entered. And then we'll start a cleanup project. And the cleanup project will start, and people will start cleaning up the data. And then after the cleanup project, data becomes bad again. And then we're back to bad data, and it's an endless life cycle. And then the tools that we have are not really present in Business Central, but there's one of those tools called Excel to get the data back into the system correctly. And you have some experience with that as well, Peter?
Eric, this is a separate webinar of about 8 hours.
Oh, yeah, that's true, right? Yeah.
Yes. My day job now is I no longer sell or implement ERP because it's just way too hard for me. What I do now is I help customers consume ERP and make sure that they are doing great work on a project. And one of the things that always pops up is how different partners that are involved in ERP implementations try to bury the difficulty of cleaning data and migrating data with Excel templates, with AI solutions, and we have a connector or there's an API, and all that stuff is nonsense. The minute I see somebody talking about cleaning data or migrating data using an Excel template, I immediately know that customer is in trouble. Because at best, even if you're a pretty decent user of Excel, what you can do is do some rudimentary cleaning. And so even if you do a great job cleaning the data in Excel, here's the problem. There's a timing issue. Excel is static. Data constantly changes minute to minute. So to me, the whole Excel issue, the minute I see that in a data cleaning or data migration format, my hair stands on end, and I immediately know there's going to be problems that we need to address. And that's one of the things that you guys so magnificently address with your platform.
So indeed, our platform, and that platform, what we built was first for finance supply chain management, where we have the data quality studio. And there, that platform starts already during the entry of data, making sure that the data is entered correctly in finance and supply chain management, correct information on customers, email addresses correct, vendors and other information, and more, of course. And that is something that process which entering of data, evaluating the policy that we had, and of course warn or have an error to the user the moment they enter data. That is something that we brought to the data quality study here in Business Central, where you can specify that actually you get a problem or an error or a warning the moment you enter the data incorrectly. So really at the source. So you don't need to go into that project to solve things. Of course, what you need to think about, what will be my strategy? What type of validations will I enter to the system? And it is something that we will do with our configuration and also how we actually set up that information, these policies in the system. And how we work this is the following. We have 4 concepts setting up, and the same in finance and supply chain management, where we have data policies, duplication checks, data conditions, and validation rules. Now, what are those? A data policy is a group of validations, what you actually use for maybe for a customer or for other parts, and that can have different versions. And within a data policy, you see the duplication checks, for example, but also the validation rules. And the validation rules could be, and I will show that in a moment, making sure that the data that is entered in the correct field is based on the business rule. So it could be having a name of a customer with a capital, or it will validate the email address. But you can also do that on a condition. A condition would be, okay, if I'm entering the data in this field, and if this field has this value, then I'm not allowed, for example, to do a certain value. So it's more like an if then else statement. And the duplication checks, configurable as well. You can decide what fields will be used to recognize a duplicate, for example, customer or vendor. So that's something that we have as building blocks here in the system. And the validation rules, I mentioned it already. These can be different types. What we saw, mandatory is very important. If something needs to be blank, mandatory, of course, is quite easy. You select a field and you say this is going to be mandatory, and from now on this is mandatory. You can also say when a field needs to be left blank. Some case in this example is when the company name should be blank, when the type of contact is person. Data patterns, phone number correctly formatted, for example, and then a range expression. Did you say there's a number only allowed between 2 values? And I see already questions coming in. Thank you for that. Some I will answer at the end of the session at the Q&A section. So thank you for getting already the questions in the system. Duplication checks, what we do here and what we try to avoid here, and it's not really, we want to say, okay, these fields are the combination of identifying that there is a duplicate. And we stop everything. So we stop the process of having the data entered in the system. So it's not after the fact. The moment the customer or the user will enter that duplicate customer, it will stop. It will not be created, that record. And that is something that we like to block before people are entering customers in the system and continue with the work, right? So that is something that we want to stop that process of a possibility that users can do that. Data conditions, I mentioned that already. In this case, payment terms or payment methods. We only want to do this and set it up as a condition when the region code is US. Something that you can do. I know payment terms on customers in a lot of cases are mandatory, but this is more like an if then else statement. And then when it's required, the user needs to populate that field, and otherwise you don't. And that is something that can be very powerful condition. Not always you have to have a field mandatory, but only on this condition applies. And then we have the outcomes. What can we set up? We can have configurable messages showing the user what type of error. There's a default error, of course, saying, hey, this field cannot be blank. But you can also, as a customer or as a user, specify what type of message will I send. And that could be with more information, not like this field cannot be blank. You can give a little bit more information to the user what the problem is. Especially when you have a condition, you want to explain why does this field need to be blank, or why do I need to populate this in this way? And then with that custom error or custom warning, you can explain it better to the user, of course. A warning would be just a warning, but you can still save, right? A custom error will be a stop. And that's why it's more or less a business tool that you can decide when do I apply these business validation rules. This is the first version, of course, for Business Central. But what we try to accomplish here is that, and there's a lot of text here, but what we try to accomplish here of getting the data correctly in the system, that the user or the business has the tools to make sure that data is entered correctly in the system, configurable. And you can make a lot of rules, what you can specify, and of course have reasons also. Why did I create this rule in the system? What process did it block me? And the examples that I currently show in the system in the demonstration are maybe not really advanced, but we want to keep it simple, but you can go really advanced. And I see that, for example, in the finance and supply chain world, where people are really doing pretty advanced things with the business validation rules to keep the data really nice entered in the system and clean, of course. And let me move into the demonstration. And Peter, just for your view, I think the font size is okay, right? Okay. So let's take you through a small demonstration. For example, if I go to my vendors, if I open this vendor, I can type in a phone number, something like this. This is what the user will see. So I am on a vendor and I'm entering a phone number. Normally the field will allow this value, but what we've created is a data pattern that will recognize saying this is an incorrect phone number. And you can do that for different things, but this is the data pattern asking me, hey, this is wrong. In a moment, I also show you how you can set this up. But that is something that will be in the regular user interface of the Business Central user, where you see there's a problem and this is an error, so the user is stopped. So I can press refresh and then of course it will be moved. If I enter a correct formatted phone number, something like this, it will be completely fine. See, so no error appears. So that is something that you do. This is a US phone number. You can of course have different phone numbers based on the country code. So you can have a data pattern, what is called different based on a condition. If this country is US, then this is the data pattern. If it's another country, you have another data pattern for your phone number. How that looks like the data pattern, I will show you in a moment. But this is the vendor card, for example. Then we have something also for the contact information or contact card. So let's navigate to my contacts. And here's the information of all my contacts. If I create a new one and just give this a name, my name, something like that, and I will change the type to a person. I made a rule that you cannot populate then the name of the company when the type is person. So let's select a company. And you see here a nicely custom error saying the company, if I go here, the company name should be blank for a contact person for a contact of type person. Another of those rules that I've configured, and then it will stop me again from doing anything if I did that. So I can hit refresh and then the record is okay again to me to save. So something like that to stop the user and entering incorrect data. Let's delete it for now. So let's now go to my customers. These are my customers and this is my customer information. So let's create a new customer in this case. I'm not going to use a template and I want to open a blank customer card and I want to start with entering this information. So I'm entering my information here. Now I can, for example, enter a phone number. At this moment, it is already recognized, and I will show you my setup earlier, that this is a duplicate. This is already there in the system, this record. I'm using now two fields, actually, the phone number and the name, but it can, of course, be a combination of fields that you say an address or a city. And if all these are the same, then we will acknowledge there's a duplicate. Something that can stop the user from entering data. It's not allowed here. What do we have more as possibilities? So for example, let's enter a credit limit for this customer. Oh, I get an error here. The credit limit actually only is allowed to be between 500 and 200. Credit limits problem, error. This is not conditional, but for example, you could have, if there's a certain customer group or something like that, then it's only allowed to have a credit limit between higher than 2,500. And now the system just stops me saying this is not allowed. So let's refresh, of course, and now let's set it up to 2,000. The system allows me again. Other information, email address. Email address is incorrect. And that's right, because this is an incorrect email address. The system can check that, again, based on a pattern. This, of course, would be really highly a candidate to change this into a custom error saying you've entered the email address incorrectly. The format is not correctly. So I will refresh again and I can do, and feel free to contact me on this email address, which is correctly formatted. Then we have a text error ID, which I can populate, of course. You see here these mandatory fields. The payment method I need to have mandatory, so let's put it on 10 days. I'm going to save my record. And then you see another custom message. And on purpose, I, of course, create a spelling mistake because it should read, you need to populate the payment method. Actually, now I need to correct the payment method. So let's do that. Let's do a bank transfer. And now I can save my record. I will save my record. And I have my ERP company number 2 now in the system. And this is not a duplicate because the system will tell me, okay, the duplicate only will be recognized when the name and the phone number is the same. So how do we set it up and how do I configure this? Because you can, of course, do that hard-coded, right? Not a problem. We like to do this with setup and configuration. So let's go into my data policies. These are the data policies. Remember the building blocks in the slide deck. These are the data policies that we set up. And I have different policies available. I had it for contact, vendor, and customer. The contact person, that was about my company name. And if I look at my validation rules, you will see the company name, the validation type is blank in this case. And the company name should be blank only. And this is my condition. These are my filter conditions saying if type, so the field number type is person, then you can give the warning. So that is there. You can, of course, have a description still for this validation or here, why did you create this? But this is something that is my contact person validation. And of course, I can create more validation rules. In my vendor validation, I had a rule about the phone number. These are my validation rules. If I look here, then you see this is called a data pattern. And in my data pattern, this is actually a regular expression, what it's called. And yes, for sure, you can use AI to create these data patterns for you, but this is for a US phone number, a data pattern. And also you will see there's already one for an email address and also an email address with other information, but that's something that you will see here. These are my data pattern possibilities. In my customer, I had more validations. I had it for a data pattern on email. I had here my credit limit. If I look at the rule here, you will see that my rule is a range expression for credit limit, and then you can specify a range that you see it has to be in between certain values. Then the payment method, that had to be mandatory. And in my mandatory, I have here my mandatory message and of course my spelling mistake there, but this is my field that is going to be mandatory. Still see that I could use a condition here, right? If I want to have a condition. So let's correct that. Probably the system will give me an error because it says, no, this is now active. And those are the policies where you see, okay, the policies, if it's active, I cannot change it. My policy is version 1. I can, of course, go to a new version. I can now make it inactive. I can also export and import these rules. That is something that we can do with rapid start. But now I can correct it if I made it inactive. And now from now on, if I make it active again, then you have a payment method with a correct message. But remember, this is data and the system. And I mention that really briefly, but if you have rapid start, if you have a package, you can, of course, install this data setup for your customer. You can create a whole set. And of course, we have the set examples here, but you can also make a set that you can import into your environment. You can have it first tested, but then into a production environment where you can have all these business rules only on configuration available. So that's something that's also quite nice. So what I like to show you is, of course, configuration. So without custom code, you can specify these business rules in the system. Triggers, of course, the moment the users enters or save the record, and it will trigger and it will show the user saying, okay, this is a problem. You need to fix this. And then you will have that ready and you don't get the bad data in the system. And again, rapid start, you can create your packages. You can then set up all the rules and import that into a production environment. Now, what I showed you was customer, vendor, and contact. That is now currently what's in this release. We are planning to do a lot more, of course. That's already ready in finance and supply chain management, where you can take a look at the legacy data test. Because, of course, I'm entering a rule, but now it only triggers when a user starts entering the data. Now we want to also make sure that if I enter a rule, that the existing data is also correct, because otherwise I'm again in my operational errors, like we mentioned earlier. And so this is something that will also be checking out and cleaning the existing data. And that will be in the next releases. And of course, we go further than customers, vendors, and contact. We will add more tables there. We like also know from the community what would be the next tables and what will be very good for users and customers to have. Items, bill of materials, employees, and others are on the roadmap also to be part of the data quality check. And what we're going to do is fuzzy matching on duplication. Now I'm having a one-to-one, right? So Eric's company and Eric's company, that's quite the same. But if I now would spell Eric with a K or Eric with a C, it could be the same company.
All of this stuff starts with data migration, usually from some other system. And data migration is always handled fairly poorly because of things that we could discuss at length. But even assume for 1 second that somebody started with pristine data in their system, which never happens. The minute you start entering data or turn on integrations or upload data, that data starts to degrade. And it starts to degrade rapidly. And the fantasy that a lot of people envision for themselves is, we'll just stick the data into the system for now because we want to go live. We understand there's issues. We'll just clean it in the new system. That never happens because the data tools that are available in the market are static tools, and cleaning data is not a static event. You're never going to catch up. So that's why this is so exciting to have this.
After data migration, the moment you let users go into the system without the rules, you will see that happening. So that is something that the questions that you have, that are worth, of course, asking you about what is your master data. And then also, what does Data Quality Studio mean? And I think you have also some experience with this, Peter.
Yes. Do you remember the phrase GIGO? So for folks that don't know how to use a rotary phone, GIGO meant garbage in, garbage out. And it was a phrase way back in the day because basically it meant if you had garbage data, you were getting garbage reporting. And so this concept has always been around. What's interesting now is with AI, those errors are magnified at lightning speed. For operations, you're going to have bad data at incremental speed. The IT guys oftentimes are trying to fix data with additional tools, data warehouses, all kinds of additional requirements of tools and time. And for leadership, if you're making decisions based on bad data, again, it's one thing if you're just processing standard reports, But now if you're using AI to run your business in some cases, because there's folks that think that AI is magic, then you could be in a world of hurt.
And that is also something for us to decide when does it matter the most to having where our data quality still fits. And you mentioned already AI, but a lot more areas or projects where our solution will fit the business. And that's what you see here as well. What are the next steps, of course? When do you want to get started with data? How you can get started? And that is something that you saw it already in action. We will take you through these. You can talk to us. And as a first pilot, Peter, a lot of people can start trying to use it, import the starting package from Microsoft App Source, and you can start using that.
Get on the program fast and early to help not only clean what we clean today, but also start steering the direction of the product.
What you will get, and that's something that you will get after the webinar. What can be next steps that you can do? Of course, you can talk to Lennox. Lennox is also on the call, I saw, but you can ask for a 30-minute demo. But of course, we will share the slide decks with you, the recording, the fact sheet, and other information after the call. So I saw some questions in the chat. Why not use an AI agent? Is that for correcting of data, or is it more recognizing the incorrect data? The AI goes to a certain length.
AI definitely has a part in your tool set. However, the business logic and the things that have to be accomplished underneath the hood to do the things that you guys do with data is so incredibly difficult that anybody wanting to replace this with AI, I don't even see how they could start to touch this. And that leads me to think about LinkedIn, where every day, hyperbolic messages about what AI can accomplish. And you get I just vibe coded my own ERP over the weekend, those types of messages. And so I get the why not vibe code this type of solution, because that's a ridiculous statement. Because yes, you can vibe code or use AI for some portion of this. But once you start drilling underneath the hood for the types of things that this tool accomplishes with 10 years of experience, that leads right into the thing that I like to point out to folks is that ironically, AI creates experts without expertise. And in the data cleaning field, you guys don't have any peers, and you don't really understand that until you drill underneath the hood, where you use AI as a helper, but AI do all the things that you guys are able to do.
And there was another question. Having duplicate customers seems more like a symptom of a bad business process. Why band-aid the process instead of fixing the process? And I think it showed that indeed the process is wrong, but if not everybody follows the process, then we want to make sure that the process is in the system and that somebody cannot go outside the process of creating a customer. And that's what we try to do with the duplication checks. The question, master data tables are easy to clean up. However, many entry header line records are posted wrong. These impact BI a lot. I fully agree. Any plans on addressing those tables? Yeah, for sure. What we've done in the finance supply chain management for Business Central, where we have indeed the header line relations, where something in the header can affect what's allowed in lines. And if they're unaligned and if they're not okay, then of course we cannot start doing posts. So for sure, we're going to address those tables as well. Of course, after post, that's a different story, but making sure that it's not allowed to be posted, everything is correct. So that's something for sure.
Expertise comes in, tools that allow you to identify something is wrong and then cleaning it. That's that first level, right? Catching the bad data and then being able to go in and drill into business processes and figure out why this is happening constantly. Is it just a matter of setting up the right flags, or is it something more inherently problematic in the system? That's where your tools points to an issue, and then expertise comes in figuring out what the problem is and fixing it.
Exactly. I think we're at the end, Peter, from the webinar. So I'd like to thank everybody. for joining. And thank you, Peter, for sharing all the information and the knowledge that you have.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Pleasure working with you, sir.
Thank you. And then I wish everybody a very nice day, and you will see a mail coming with all the information we promised.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.